Welcome back, horror enthusiasts. Today, we have a chilling collection of true stories that will send shivers down your spine. These are not just tales, they are real-life experiences that will haunt you long after the video ends. So dim the lights, grab a blanket, and let's dive into these three disturbing, true scary stories. Story 1. The Midnight Caller. Our first story takes us to a quiet suburban neighborhood, where Sarah, a young woman in her mid-20s, lived alone in a small but cozy house. She had always enjoyed the peaceful solitude until the night that changed everything. It started as a typical evening. Sarah finished watching a movie, locked her doors, and got into bed, ready for a good night's sleep. Just as she was drifting off, her phone rang. She frowned, glancing at the screen. Unknown number. Her first instinct was to ignore it, but curiosity got the best of her. Maybe it was a wrong number. Maybe someone needed help. She answered. Hello? For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then a whisper, I can see you. A chill ran down her spine. She sat up, glancing around her darkened bedroom. The curtains were drawn, the doors were locked. She was alone. Was this some kind of prank? Who is this? She asked, her voice unsteady. The line went dead. Trying to shake off the uneasy feeling, she put her phone on silent and lay back down. Maybe it was just some kid messing around. But then, another call. This time she didn't answer. Her phone buzzed again and again. Each call came from the same unknown number. After a few minutes, her voicemail notification lit up. Reluctantly, she pressed play. Heavy breathing, and then, I'm closer now. Sarah's stomach turned. She jumped out of bed and rushed to the window, pulling back the curtain just an inch to peek outside. The street was empty. The houses across from hers were dark. Everything seemed normal, but it didn't feel normal. She double-checked that the doors were locked, every window shut. Her heart pounded as she sat on the edge of her bed, gripping her phone, waiting for another call. Minutes passed. Silence. Maybe it was over. Then a knock at the front door. Sarah's breath hitched. She crept toward the door, her hands trembling. Slowly, she leaned in to look through the peephole. No one was there. A wave of relief hit her, but it didn't last long. Her phone buzzed again. She hesitated before glancing at the screen. Unknown number. With shaking fingers, she answered, I'm right outside. Sarah's vision blurred with panic. She stumbled back, dialing 911 as fast as she could. The ringing seemed to go on forever before an operator finally picked up. 911, what's your emergency? I think someone's outside my house, she whispered, barely able to get the words out. Stay on the line, ma'am. Can you see them? Sarah turned back to the peephole. Still, nothing. I don't see anyone, but they keep calling me. They said they're outside. Stay inside. Keep your doors locked. Officers are on their way. Just as she exhaled in relief, her phone screen glitched. The call with 911 suddenly dropped. Her screen flickered. Another incoming call. She stared in horror as the same words flashed across the screen. Unknown number. With a deep breath, she answered, her voice barely a whisper. What do you want? The voice on the other end chuckled softly, almost playfully. Then came the final whisper. Let me in. Sarah gasped and dropped her phone, backing away from the door. Her mind raced. Was this some elaborate prank? A stalker? Or something much worse? The knocking came again. This time it was harder. More insistent. Bang, bang, bang. She grabbed the nearest object, a lamp from the side table, her heart pounding so loud she could barely hear her own breath. She wanted to scream, but fear locked her throat. Then, silence. The knocking stopped. The buzzing of her phone stopped. Everything went completely still. Sarah didn't move for what felt like hours. She waited, barely breathing. The air was thick, suffocating. And then, the doorknob twisted. It was slow at first, a light jiggling as if someone was testing it. Then it turned harder, more violently. The door was locked, but was the back door? Sarah's blood ran cold. She had locked it, right? Without thinking, she turned and sprinted toward the kitchen, her socks sliding across the hardwood floor. She reached the back door just as she heard the sound, a faint creak. The door was opening. She shoved it shut with all her strength, twisting the lock as fast as she could. Her chest heaved as she pressed her back against it, her entire body shaking. Silence. Had she been fast enough? Had she stopped whatever it was from coming inside? Then a voice, right behind her ear. Too late. Sarah screamed. The next morning, when the police arrived, they found her front door wide open. Her phone was on the floor, screen shattered, and Sarah was gone. There was no sign of struggle, no forced entry, no footprints, no clues, just an empty house and a single voicemail left on her phone. A whisper, "Let me in." Story 2, The Shadow in the Hallway. Our second story comes from Mark, a dedicated night shift nurse working in St. Vincent's Hospital, a place with a long, unsettling history. The hospital had been standing for over a century, its walls holding stories of lives saved and lost. Many staff members whispered about its haunted reputation. Patients often spoke of shadowy figures lurking in the halls, of voices calling out in the night, of unseen hands touching them while they slept. Mark, however, wasn't one to believe in ghosts. He had spent years working the night shift, and he had never seen anything that couldn't be explained by exhaustion or imagination, until one night changed everything. It was a quiet evening, the kind that made every little sound seem louder. The hospital halls were dimly lit, their sterile white walls bathed in a dull, flickering glow. Mark had just finished checking on a patient when, out of the corner of his eye, he saw something move. At the far end of the hallway stood a figure, a tall, dark silhouette. It didn't move, it didn't breathe, it just stood there. Mark's heart skipped a beat. His first thought was that it was a patient who had wandered out of bed. It happened all the time, especially with the elderly. "Sir?" he called out, stepping forward. No answer. The figure remained motionless. Mark took another step, and another. As he approached, the air around him grew cold. The hallway, which had moments before been silent, now carried a faint whisper. And then, in the blink of an eye, the figure was gone. Mark froze, blinking rapidly. He looked down the hallway. Nothing, no sound, no movement. It was as if the figure had never been there. A chill crept up his spine. Shaking his head, he convinced himself it was just exhaustion. The long shifts, the dim lighting, it had to be a trick of the eyes. Still, something about the moment left him feeling uneasy. Later that night, Mark was checking on an elderly patient in one of the darker corners of the hospital. The room was dim, only the beeping of the heart monitor breaking the silence. As he adjusted the patient's IV, he heard it. A whisper, "Help me." Mark turned sharply. The room was empty. His breath came faster now. The air felt thick, like it was pressing down on him. He took a deep breath, trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was the wind, maybe it was just his imagination. Then he felt it. A hand. Cold, light as air, brushing against his shoulder. He whipped around, his heart hammering in his chest. Nothing. The room was silent, still. Mark stumbled back, his pulse racing. He needed to get out of there. As he left, he ran into Claire, a fellow night shift nurse. She took one look at his pale face and frowned. "You saw something, didn't you?" she asked softly. Mark hesitated. "It was just nothing," he muttered. Claire's face darkened. "You saw the shadow, didn't you?" Mark felt his stomach drop. "What do you mean?" Claire lowered her voice. "It's been here for years, Mark. The shadow, the whispers, the patient who never left." Mark felt the chill return. "Who was she?" Claire's lips parted slightly, as if choosing her words carefully. "No one knows for sure, but people say she died here, and that she's still looking for something." Mark swallowed hard, forcing himself to shake off the feeling. It was just stories, just hospital folklore, wasn't it? But then, the real horror began. As Mark was finishing up his shift, he walked down one of the quieter hallways. Most of the lights had dimmed for the night, leaving the corridor bathed in shadows. And that's when he saw her. She was standing right in front of him, a woman in a tattered hospital gown. Her skin was pale, her eyes were hollow, empty pits. She was pointing, down the hallway. Mark's feet felt like they were made of lead. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to run. But something pulled him forward, an unseen force, a quiet, desperate pull. His breathing came in short gasps as he followed the woman's direction. With each step, the air grew colder. The hallway stretched longer. The fluorescent lights above flickered erratically. Finally, he reached a door at the very end of the hall, a door that hadn't been opened in years. His trembling hand reached for the handle. Slowly, he pushed the door open. Inside, dust coated everything. An untouched hospital bed, old medical equipment, a rusted IV stand. Then he saw it. A nameplate on the wall. Patient 237, missing. Mark's blood ran cold. Missing. The whisper came again, softer this time. "I never left." The air around him shifted. The shadows in the room moved. Then, the door slammed shut. Mark let out a strangled gasp, yanking at the handle. It wouldn't budge. The lights flickered wildly, the room pulsing with an unseen energy. Then, footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming closer. Mark backed away, his breath coming in sharp, ragged gasps. A soft touch grazed his arm, then a whisper, right against his ear. "Help me," Mark screamed. And then, the door flew open. He stumbled out, gasping for breath. The hallway was empty, silent. The room behind him was gone. Not just empty, not just abandoned, gone, like it had never existed. The next morning, Mark quit. He never returned to that hospital again. And to this day, no one speaks about patient 237, because if you say her name too many times, she might come looking for you. Story 3. The Uninvited Guest. Our final story is about a family who moved into a charming old house. At first, everything seemed perfect, but soon they began to notice strange occurrences. Doors would open and close on their own, and they often heard footsteps in the attic. The Thompson family had been searching for their dream home for months. When they stumbled upon a charming Victorian house at the edge of town, it seemed like fate. The house was beautiful. Tall windows, intricate woodwork, and a large attic that their daughter Lily found absolutely fascinating. It was everything they had ever wanted. But they weren't the only ones living there. At first, the odd occurrences were small. A door creaking open on its own, a whisper of a breeze where there were no windows open, the sound of light footsteps in the attic, even though no one was up there. They brushed it off. Old houses creaked. It was nothing to worry about. Then the disturbances grew. One night, while watching TV in the living room, a loud crash erupted from upstairs. The parents, Daniel and Sarah, bolted up the stairs, their hearts pounding. In the hallway, a picture frame had fallen from the wall. But it wasn't just any picture, it was a photo of the previous owners. Sarah picked it up, dusting off the shattered glass, when she noticed something. There was someone else in the picture. A shadowy figure stood behind the family, partially obscured but unmistakably present. A chill crept up her spine. Daniel tried to dismiss it. It's probably just a trick of the light. But Sarah wasn't so sure. Curious and increasingly uneasy, Sarah decided to research the house's history. What she found made her blood run cold. The previous owners had a daughter. She had vanished. No explanations, no leads. She was simply gone. It had happened in this house. Sarah didn't know what to do with this information. She wanted to tell Daniel, but he was skeptical about anything paranormal. So she kept it to herself until something happened that neither of them could ignore. One evening, as they were putting Lily to bed, she clutched her mother's arm and whispered, "The lady in my room sings to me at night." Sarah's breath hitched. "What lady, sweetheart?" "The one who sits in the corner. She says she's lonely." Sarah and Daniel exchanged glances, unease settling over them. "It's just a bad dream," Daniel assured her. But that night, as they lay in bed, a soft voice drifted through the halls. A woman's voice, singing. The parents shot up, their bodies tense. Sarah gripped Daniel's arm. "You hear that, right?" He didn't answer. He was already on his feet, moving toward Lily's room. Slowly, he pushed the door open. Lily was sound asleep, but the singing, it didn't stop. It was coming from somewhere else in the house. The hallway stretched before them, dimly lit by the soft glow of a nightlight. The melody grew fainter, drawing them toward the attic door. Sarah shook her head, gripping Daniel's arm. "Don't." But something compelled him to move forward. The attic stairs groaned under his weight as he climbed, the air growing colder with each step. At the top, the attic was still and quiet. Dust hung in the air like a fine mist, disturbed only by the faint glow of the moon through the small round window. And in the center of the room sat an old, dusty trunk. A whisper carried through the attic. "Help me." Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He turned to leave. The attic door slammed shut. Downstairs, Sarah screamed. Lily was gone. The bed was empty, the sheets tossed aside. A giggle echoed through the house, from the attic. Sarah's stomach twisted. She raced up the stairs, pounding on the door. "Daniel, open it!" From inside, Daniel's voice was strained. I can't. It won't budge." Then, a laugh. Not Lily's. Something else. The attic door suddenly burst open, nearly throwing Sarah off balance. Inside, Lily sat cross-legged in front of the trunk, smiling. "Look, Mommy, I found a friend!" Sarah rushed to her, scooping her into her arms. "We're leaving," she said firmly, her heart slamming against her ribs. But Lily twisted in her grasp, reaching out toward the trunk. "She doesn't want me to go." Daniel yanked the trunk open. Inside were old toys, dresses, a small pair of shoes, and at the very bottom, a newspaper clipping. It was about the missing girl. Her body was never found. The air in the attic turned frigid. The temperature dropped so low that their breath became visible. Then, the singing returned. This time, it was right behind them. Daniel and Sarah turned slowly. A figure stood in the attic's darkened corner. A girl, her eyes black and hollow. Her mouth moved in song, though her face was frozen in an expression of sorrow. Sarah clutched Lily tightly. "We have to leave now." The girl took a step forward. The floor beneath her creaked. Another step, then another. Lily reached out toward her. "She just wants to play." Sarah pulled her away, her voice sharp. "No, Lily." The attic rumbled. The lights flickered wildly. The girl's voice rose, a shrill wail now. Not a song, but a scream. Daniel grabbed Sarah's hand, and together they ran. The attic door slammed behind them. They didn't stop running. Not down the stairs, not through the hallway, not until they were in their car, speeding away from the house they had once called home. The next morning, the Thompsons listed the house for sale. They never spoke of what had happened, and they never returned. But sometimes, late at night, Sarah swore she could still hear it, a distant, sorrowful lullaby, calling Lily's name. Thank you for joining us for these 3 disturbing, true, scary stories. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more spine-chilling tales, and share your own scary experiences in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe and keep the lights on.